Next, we will be hosting a few speakers in various fields of research who will be talking about their work and their role in leading their teams to greater and more groundbreaking discoveries. The first guest we will host is Carolyn G., the president of Women in CS at Harvard University. Carolyn is a junior at Harvard University studying computer science. She is originally from the Bay Area in California. Carolyn is especially passionate about statistics, machine learning, and software engineering. Outside of academics, she enjoys taking socially distant walks and playing cards and board games.
Our next guest is Raleigh Schweinfurth, who is a second Robbie Scholar at Columbia University, which supports talented students with research opportunities as undergraduates. Raleigh is currently a junior doing a double major in environmental chemistry and music. Outside of class, Raleigh currently serves as president of the Columbia University Kokikai Aikido Club.
Awesome. I'll introduce our next guest, who is Justin. Justin's a junior at Harvard, concentrating in mathematics. Outside of class, he's involved with Harvard Financial Analyst Club, Black Diamond Capital, and Chinese Cultural Card Game Club. He enjoys running and playing chess casually in his free time.
Our next guest is Vinjay, who is a junior at Stanford studying math and computer science. His main research areas include generative models, AI in healthcare, and AI safety, and he's passionate about making sure technology's role in society is safe and value-aligned. Vinjay is currently taking the quarter off school to work at a startup, and in his free time, he enjoys playing Ultimate Frisbee, climbing, writing puzzles, and eating Chipotle.
Last but not least, our final guest is Kyle, who is a junior at Harvard studying chemistry, physics, and mathematics. Among other things, he's interested in inorganic chemistry and quantum information science research. In his free time, Kyle enjoys rock climbing, going on hikes in the mountains with his dog, and thinking about random math problems.
Okay, hi everyone, I'm Dhruti, and I'm going to be moderating this panel. And thank you to all of our panelists for taking time out of your day and joining our AI Summit. So let me just jump in. The first question I would like to ask is, when did you get started, and what got you interested in pursuing your research opportunity or your area of study? I'm going to start with Carolyn, if Carolyn could just maybe give me an answer.
Yeah, hi, so my name is Carolyn. Thank you for introducing me. So I guess my area of study is computer science. So I actually didn't do a lot of computer science in high school. It was mostly something like a passion that I developed after graduating high school. But in high school, I did like a lot of math. And I think that naturally just transitioned. Like I wanted to apply this interest in theory in a more applied way. And I think computer science was definitely the natural path for that. So after I graduated from high school, I took a computer science course at a local college, really loved it. And that's how I decided to study computer science at Harvard since then.
Okay, thank you. And what about Raleigh?
So the way I became really interested in my field of research actually came out of my love for food, because I love to eat. And so I was actually watching a documentary focusing on the importance of bees. And I found out that if there were no bees, we would only be able to eat white bread, brown bread, and black tea, and that would be it. And so I thought that was incredibly important. And then it turns out that shortly after that event happened, was another of which Oregon experienced largest where 50,000 bees died. And I got involved with research surrounding that, and that's mainly how I guess I came to what I was interested in now.
Okay, Justin?
Yeah, so my interest in math was sort of originated by chance. I'm studying it now. But coming into freshman year of college, I thought I wanted to study either physics or astrophysics. And I took an introductory math class, really liked it. And then since then, I've just taken more math and I've liked it every time. And so that's how my interest in math originated.
Okay, and Vinjay?
Hello. Yeah, I've been pretty interested in understanding like how things work at a fundamental level for a really long time. It's been like, some like understanding how various things around me work as a kid was like my favorite pastime. And then I guess it sort of naturally led me down the path of the sciences. And then, going even deeper, it all really comes down to physics and then down to math. So that's sort of how I got interested in math. Plus, I just think like it's fun and pretty cool. And then for computer science, I think my interest primarily came out of my desire to like do things in the real world that were cool. And I felt like being a young kid, being a high school student, college student, oftentimes, it's hard to actually build big things, but you can actually just do almost anything software related from your laptop. And so just the possibilities of studying CS and being able to build cool things that improve people's lives really drew me to it.
Thank you. And finally, Kyle.
Yeah, thanks for that introduction. So my interest, I was always pretty interested in science, throughout elementary school. And then I think my interest in chemistry actually came about. I was watching I found this channel on YouTube called Nerd Rage, kind of a funny name. But that channel had all these chemistry videos, and they were really well explained, and they really went into the science. And that inspired me to build a garage lab. So I started doing some experiments in my garage, and that really kind of kicked off my love for inorganic chemistry. And then actually, since I thought I was going to do inorganic chemistry for the rest of my life, for sure. But then since coming to college, I think my interests have diversified a little bit. I've taken, some physics and math courses, and I really enjoyed those. So right now, I definitely have other interests, and I'm still figuring out where that's going to take me.
Okay, thank you everyone for the brief introductions. And so the next question is, what advice would you give students who want to pursue their own research opportunities? Like if any of you have gone through the science fair process, or would you recommend they start in middle school, high school, or maybe even college? And this is mostly for like Justin, Raleigh, Kyle, Vinjay, if any of you want to jump in first and start answering.
I can start. So I did a lot of research in high school. Since coming to college, less so. But I think in high school, the most effective way to begin is to start with, I guess, the universe of all professors that you're interested in working with and just start emailing them. I think at the end of the day, this is a numbers game and you only need to succeed with one professor, like reach out to them, have them agree to do research with you, and that's all you need. So that's the advice I'd give to start kind of doing research at whatever stage in life you're in. In terms of this research process or like science fair process, I think that is sort of a lot of rehearsal. You come up with your project, you make your board, and then afterwards really thinking through how to synthesize your project in a concise and coherent manner and deliver it in a way that any judge can understand. And then I think that's the advice that I'd give there. That's it for me.
Yeah, just I want to really emphasize what Justin's first point about reaching out to professors and finding a mentor, especially as an undergrad or in high school. You'd be surprised at how nice and helpful people can be, especially people like professors or grad students who seem to be quite busy, often can be quite open towards mentoring a young, enthusiastic, and curious student. And I think in general, like people really love working with those types of younger members of a younger generation. And so definitely like don't be discouraged if someone doesn't respond to you or if they turn you down. Just keep emailing people. And that's probably something that I bet we all have in common. for those of us who did research in high school is like we just contacted people and then someone responded favorably and we met with them and then it clicked. Right. And yeah, I guess regarding science fairs, you know, I didn't really do too many, but the ones I did do, I found the biggest takeaways for me were definitely the people that I met in the process. You know, like some of these guys on the panel I met through science fairs in high school, and we're still pretty good friends now. So yeah, I mean, definitely like a good opportunity that's worth checking out.
So going off that sort of, I actually didn't do, I didn't really want to do science fair. I remember I had this teacher in middle school kept trying to convince me to do it. And I was like, no, I don't want to. It's stupid. And then, you know, in high school, I took this class where they actually required that you do science fair for it. And then I did science fair and like nobody had told me like, you can win money doing science fair. Like I worked, you know, I worked like a job, like doing some trail building for like 2 summers in a row. And I made like, you know, science fair actually like there's some real prizes you can win in terms of money there. And so it's, you know, even at like the local and state competitions, there are some really cool prizes you can win. And so that was something that I never really realized and that I think is super cool and unique about science fair. And then, yeah, with regards to finding a lab, I think the 2 things that are most important that I've found is the culture of the lab, which is actually really hard to, that's the really hard piece to figure out, I think. And then whether you are really interested in what they're doing in the lab. And so I think it's easy to send a lot of emails to a lot of professors and just kind of see what sticks. But it also can be really good to try to really figure out, you know, where do you want to work and then really do everything you can to try to see if you can work there. And maybe you'll like it.
So I actually had a little bit of a different experience with regard to pursuing research because I never really joined a lab or had anything like that. So I think the thing that I thought was the most important thing that you can do is just continue to observe the world around you and to ask questions and to start with that. And then I'm sure, yes, of course, and how this works that people will be willing to help you and whatnot. But I think it also just starts with asking questions and essentially having the courage to try and answer those questions and going through the scientific process. And I think that's really something that I really enjoyed about doing science fairs and whatnot was actually the learning experience that came along with it and the process of trying to problem solve and trying to essentially understand the world around us and just learning and meeting people at these. And I think that process was really special and really cool in that sense as well.
Okay, and Kyle, you had mentioned like the most important thing at a lab is the culture. So how did you go about like figuring out if that was the right culture?
So I think it's hard. It gets easier as you get older to figure that out. Like as you know, once you get to college, you can actually just kind of walk into the lab or email some of the grad students or maybe email some of the undergrads that previously worked in the lab. But I think you can actually, so the group websites, sometimes you can actually get a sense of the culture from looking at the group websites. You know, this is more directed for like people who are in middle school or high school. I think looking at group websites can be really helpful. You know, you can kind of, oftentimes on the group websites, they'll post like, you know, these are the, you know, we did this hike on this day and it was really fun, and they'll post pictures from it or something. And those are usually good signs. If there's really never any kind of group activities or you don't see any kind of evidence that that there's really a community, like a research community there, then that can sometimes be a red flag, but it's also hard to tell just from the website.
Okay, and another question is, what advice would you give for less like outspoken students, whether it's research or you're taking a leadership opportunity? What advice would you give to more of those introverted people? Vijay, Carolyn, Justin, or anyone else, if you would like to hop on and answer the question.
Yeah, I can start us off with that question. So I guess like to give a bit of background, currently I'm the Harvard Women in Computer Science co-president, but I definitely did not imagine myself in this position at all. I think like definitely in high school, I would have described myself, I think in the first few years as like shy, quiet, like not the kind of person to take initiative and put myself out there. But I think it really is like conquering that kind of fear of like putting yourself out there and just like trying and just exploring. And I think that once I kind of got over that like initial fear of like putting myself out there, I realized that I guess get noticed by asking questions, by speaking up, by voicing your opinion, your thoughts. And I think that that's just really, really important in today's society. So I think like from there, I learned that like even though like it might be uncomfortable, like you have to be uncomfortable. You have to like push yourself outside of your comfort zone in order to achieve this. So I think specifically for Harvard Women in Computer Science, it's a really, really large community with hundreds of people. And I think coming in as a freshman, I like did not see myself like leading this organization in a few years. But I think what was really important for me was just kind of serving in positions that are not necessarily like, oh, like the leader, but rather positions where I feel like, oh, I can kind of get a feel for like how this organization works behind the scenes, try to organize some events. So again, it's like taking kind of steps to push myself outside of my comfort zone. And I guess like here I am. So I guess I didn't super intend to become the president, but because I was really, really passionate about the organization and the organization's mission, like I think that love for the organization made me want to take on this role.
Yeah, I can sort of jump in. Vinjay kind of touched upon this a little while ago, but I think generally speaking, people older than yourself are very open to helping you. And so, and the reason is because I think that they've been in your shoes before, they know what sort of advice you're looking for, and they want to be of help. So I think reaching out to students older than you, students that are currently in leadership positions in clubs, and asking for their advice, their mentorship. I think those are sort of avenues to get a better experience with the club, but also develop relationships with mentors that can sort of guide you along the way. And I think that's the advice I'd give with regards to like club leadership and how to navigate that.
Yeah, I guess definitely really agree with what Carolyn and Justin were saying, and thanks for sharing that. My 2 cents are also that it's really important, especially if you're someone who I think has a little bit of a harder time, voicing your thoughts or sort of stepping into like a bigger or leadership type role where you feel like there's more responsibility and eyes on you. It's really important to pick an area or a group that has a vision that you're really passionate about. And so you're sort of motivated to do things not necessarily because of the leadership role, but because you really care a lot about the vision of what it is that you want to accomplish through this project, group, whatever. And you can sort of rally people around you towards that shared vision. And that's really what is the hallmark of a good leader, and is something that sort of, might help you go a bit out of your comfort zone if you're doing something because you care so deeply about like that future that you want to build with the club.
Okay. And the next one is more for like Raleigh and Kyle. So Raleigh, I know you mentioned how you have an interest in like bees, and Kyle, I know you love rock climbing. So how have you kind of used your other interests and incorporated that into your research?
Sure, I can start. So I think with incorporating it into my research, so my research was kind of a combination of looking at bees, which is more related to environmental science, and then combining that with like analytical chemistry techniques to essentially combine those two fields. And I think just being in college as well and just taking a variety of courses in a variety of areas, being able to work with that interdisciplinary aspect has been just really incredible in helping you and to understand concepts in different ways. So like it's been fascinating to take like a course on music and see how that informs your art course, and then to take your art course and see how that informs your science course, and then to take your science course and see how that informs your philosophy course. And I think through that, that's something that's been really helpful, just to see that interdisciplinary combination between the variety of subjects.
So for me, I guess rock climbing at the very basic level, my interest in rock climbing sort of also goes with an interest in rocks, and my interest in rocks led to some things I did in my garage lab in high school, some research I did there. But I think more generalized, rock climbing is very much problem solving. You have a sequence of holds going up a wall. And so when you look at a rock climb, you're actually solving a problem. You're trying to figure out how to connect the holds, using your body such that you can get to the top. And that is something that I think is very fun and is very, reminiscent of, having a lot of different pieces of evidence and trying to put together a hypothesis in science.
Okay, and the next question is, how do you think about starting discussions around ethical dilemmas or bias in your research? And this is one kind of directed towards Vinjay and your research, and how can we start these conversations in our community?
Yeah, this is a wonderful question. And it has so many layers to it, I'd say. So there's, I guess, my research is broadly within AI. And recently, I think I've also gotten interested in other forms of very long-term concerns to humanity. AI safety being one of them, but there's also a host of other really long-term problems that are very under-researched that could have significant impact on humankind's ability to survive the next 100 years. But stepping back a bit, when we speak about biases in people's thinking, there's many different kinds of biases, right? Some of the biases we're most familiar with within AI, for example, that are systemic to the field include stuff like racial biases or gender biases that make their way into algorithms themselves because they're sort of reflected in society and in the training data. And this is a systemic problem within the field of intelligence systems that interact with people, and one that I think is super important. And fortunately, a lot more people within the field are starting to discuss this and take this very seriously. Another form of a bias that I think is much less discussed and is also pretty interesting is a bias towards short-termism, or towards basically accomplishing goals that are relevant in the short term but might actually be bad for us in the long term. For example, in the development of AI, this is primarily done in academic labs and in Silicon Valley, essentially. And companies like Google or Facebook or Amazon are actually developing the state-of-the-art tech in AI. And ultimately, they're motivated by what makes them money. And so there's a concern that, whatever they're doing might not actually be properly ethically thought out because of its implications on marginalized groups, right? For example, algorithmic bias that affects people of different ethnicities, minorities, people of different genders, but also people of future generations, in the same sense that, climate change is a problem that affects future generations. The way we develop our AI also affects future generations because AI safety as a broad problem is also very large. So in terms of how this actually affects me in my research, I think recently I've gotten a lot more drawn towards these types of problems based off of connections I've made through actually very different types of classes, like philosophy classes or classes on political science and how we organize our society. And it's gotten me thinking a lot more about how can we make sure that the algorithms we build are safe for people, and that the tech industry and the tech that we create is sort of value aligned in terms of the incentives for why people want to build things so that it doesn't have lasting impacts that are bad for our species.
Okay, and going off of that, also a sub question is, a lot of the people attending this event are high schoolers or middle schoolers, including myself. And how do we go about starting these discussions really in our community?
Yeah, that's also a great question. I think, stuff like the GCL events are from what I've seen, are excellent ways of doing this. getting yourselves educated about these types of issues, and that is really helpful because there are so many layers of depth you can go into in learning about these things and reading about them. In terms of starting these conversations, I do think that there is a large movement within the field of computer science and technology that is just starting on how to make these algorithms more fair and equitable, and how to change the culture of CS and tech to be more fair and equitable. And that's a conversation that definitely you should be having even at the high school level, and that I would strongly encourage you guys to bring up in your CS classes or in your any class basically that has a relationship with technology. It could even be a history class, interesting to talk about, have a discussion in like how the development of technology throughout history has affected marginalized groups and how we can like learn from that to influence the way we're developing tech right now. So definitely a great question, and it's something I hope that you all are thinking about.
Okay, and the next question, Raleigh and Kyle, how has COVID-19 and the entire pandemic shaped your research?
I can jump in here. So I was sort of lucky that I'm doing some physics research right now that luckily is something that I can do virtually. So I'm connected virtually. I can use Chrome Remote Desktop to connect virtually to a computer in the lab and run experiments. And so that's been really nice, considering a lot of the research I've done previously is not possible to do remotely. But I think it's also, I guess, it has affected my productivity. And I think that the reason for that is that there's a certain schedule associated with going into the lab, going to regular group meetings, the face-to-face human interaction. I think that forces a certain schedule that's really helpful for research and or really anything, to be honest. And by doing everything virtually from my house, it's much harder to get that schedule naturally. And so I have to really try to force myself to try to have some kind of a schedule throughout my week so that I can still get things done. So that's been the biggest effect for me.
So I guess the way that COVID has really affected the kind of research is I'm still actually in the process of trying to find a lab at Columbia. And so it's really difficult, of course, to do wet lab work when you can't physically be in the lab. So I definitely would just say it's an ongoing process that's still affecting it.
How have you guys kind of pushed yourself to remain productive even though you're not able to do as much as you have?
That's a good question. I think for me, it's that I see this sort of college period of my life as a time to figure out what I want to do. Obviously, what I want to do is going to change even past college. But I think that the motivation to figure out what I want to do drives the fact that I need to do stuff. Because I think in order to figure out what you like and what you don't like, you really have to dive deep into different things. Because you can't just, if you try one thing at a very surface level, and then you're like, oh, I didn't really like it, like it was okay, then you don't really know whether you liked it or not because you were just kind of skating on the surface level. Maybe you would have really liked it had you gone deeper. And so for me, I'm trying to get a little bit of depth in my research so that then I can have a better idea of if that's something I want to do moving forward.
Okay. Next question. This is for Carolyn. How you mentioned how you're a leader in your community. So how has that affected your view of computer science and in general?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. So I personally really love the computer science community at Harvard University. But I think being a leader of Harvard Women in CS, which I'll abbreviate as WICS, has really also made me almost critical of it, but not, I think it's really important to look at the things you love with a critical eye because while there are many aspects of this community and this department that I really love, I think there are also really critical and crucial places that it could improve. So for an example, I guess, is maybe like how the teaching staff of the community is trained. So I just think that like being a leader has made me also like more attuned to the needs of the students in this community, as well as the department on how they could improve. Yeah, so again, I think the takeaway mostly just would be to not only just look at something that you love, like of all the good parts, but also like looking at it with a critical eye and seeing how you can make it better for future generations.
Okay. And Justin, how did you get interested in finance, and like how do you find opportunities to pursue your interest in your area? Or do you feel like there's a research background that supported this interest?
Yeah, that's a good question. My interest in finance was also sort of by luck. At Harvard, there are a lot of organizations on campus that sort of provide an education in being able to understand companies, read their financial statements, things like that. And I joined one of these clubs freshman year, found a lot of great mentors, a lot of great friends. So that's part of the reason I stayed involved. But the other aspect of it is I did find finance and research to be similar in nature. In that at the end of the day, I think both of these fields, you're processing a lot of information and then you arrive at some conclusion, you know. In finance, you take a lot of information and then you decide whether to invest in a company. In research, you take a lot of information and data, and then you try to draw some conclusion from that. And so in that sense, I think the research skills I developed, you know, digging deep for data, for like information, papers, things like that, that is transferred very well into finance. And sort of a large reason that I still do it and find it interesting.
Okay, thank you for that. And so another question is, any of you guys can tell me something interested or an impactful project that you've worked on that kind of really stuck with you? Or even just like an impactful experience that like no matter what you do, it's just always there and it motivates you and pushes you.
Yeah, I think I can start. This is not necessarily like a very like broad or like large experience at all, but I think in high school at some point when I was doing research, I really liked it. But at some point I had to basically just like look through like 35 papers and just like grab a single number from each paper, and you had to like look through the whole thing to find it. And that was like extremely boring and I really didn't like it. But it kind of made me realize that like no matter what you end up pursuing, I think at some point you're going to have to do some really grindy work that is really, really boring. And that should not be disincentivize you or like reduce your interest in the topic. I think early on in like middle school and high school, when I like found something really boring, even if I found everything else interesting, I just stopped doing it. But to realize that this is going to be there in all aspects of your life, and you're going to have to do boring things in life, that's like, I think, been sort of important for me to realize in all the things that I do now.
Yeah. Okay, all right. I'm gonna ask one more question, and then I'm gonna open up the Q&A for like all the attendees. So the last question is, what advice would you give high school students in like the college application process? Maybe Vinjay, do you want to start us off?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, college apps are, no joke, it is a rough time. It's a lot of work. But I guess like the biggest piece of advice that I'd offer, well, there's a few things. First of all, start early. And, you know, that's like the one thing that seems obvious, but that very few people actually do. And then almost everyone who doesn't do that regrets not starting earlier. So start early if you can. The other thing is, when you go to colleges to visit them, or I guess maybe it's hard right now because of COVID, but when you talk to people at colleges to learn about, is this a good fit for me? One piece of advice I found was pretty helpful is, sometimes, you might know a freshman at the college or you might know a sophomore at the college. I found it's quite helpful to also try to interact with someone who's older as well. Maybe someone who graduated recently or someone who is a junior or senior, because they tend to have a pretty different perspective that can often be really helpful for you. Another great type of person to talk to would be, an instructor in an area that you're really interested in, or like a professor. If you can just get even a short meeting with them, that would be probably very helpful for you. And finally, one thing I struggled with for a really long time when I was in high school was deciding like what's the right place for me, and trying to make up my mind between multiple options, and that can be a really difficult process as well. And I guess the biggest piece of advice I would give for that is, it's honestly, like, when you do end up going to college at a place, there are going to be so many opportunities, almost regardless of what college you go to. Out of, let's say, the top like 500, 1,000 colleges, there's like so many things to do at all these places, that regardless of where you actually end up going, when you graduate 4 years later and you look back, it's equally possible at any of these places to feel like, hey, I did a lot at this place. I grew so much. Like, I wouldn't be happier anywhere else. Which, it took me a while to realize, but it occurred to me that, if 4 years from now I look back, I'm going to think that I made the right decision, regardless of what decision I made, if I, make use of all the opportunities that are presented to me in college. And so I think that mindset might help you also in getting through the process, and sort of thinking about trying to use it as an opportunity to make you a better person, scholar, researcher, someone who can impact the world, rather than just thinking about like, oh, what is the right place for me?
Yeah, I can talk next about some advice for applying to college. So I think the first thing is like reuse your essays for different colleges. That's a huge one, because I think if you don't reuse your essays, if you're applying to say like maybe 10 or more schools, like that's already like 60 to like 80 essays, honestly. And so like a lot of colleges will have overlapping topics. So for example, if you're applying to like a college, it might be like why like blank university. So like maybe writing an essay template for that and then substituting specific nouns for the specific colleges like would be really, really helpful. Again, for example, if you're applying to, I think, colleges on the Common App, but also maybe on another like application. So I'm from California, and for example, like the University of California or the UC system has a separate application like website and everything. So like reuse your Common App essay for one of the UC essays. And then like that'll save you a lot of time, I think, which I like did and found really, really helpful. Another thing I think is important is to, I think more at a high level, think about like what kind of story you want to present to each college that you're applying to. So what I did was I thought of like 5 core aspects of my identity. They might have been like activities or experiences I had in high school. They might be things I'm passionate about. They might be like my volunteer experiences, my summer experiences, research, etc., things like that. And make sure that every school that you're applying to gets this, like gets some vision into these 5 core aspects that you brainstormed about yourself, because you want to present like all of your good parts to the colleges, and you want each college to get to know you as a person. So like by doing this, you can like make sure that, oh, like this college wants this set of essays, and in each of these essays, I touched upon this aspect of myself. So really just looking at your own identity as kind of a story that you're telling to the colleges. Yeah, and doing that through essays. And I guess I also wanted to touch up upon like choosing colleges almost in a sense. I also struggled a lot to choose between some colleges, and I think what helped me make my decision was like really meeting the people there, as well as envisioning what kind of person I wanted to be after 4 years and which college kind of helped me towards that vision. But at the end of the day, I think that no matter where I chose, like, I think what really matters is your attitude and like how you choose to spend the time there. Like I think I could have gone anywhere, and like without the right attitude, I would have been unhappy. But I think at the end of the day, college, like your college is not that deep. It really is like your approach on like how you want to spend these 4 years and your attitude towards it. Yeah.
I'd like to just quickly dive in with a couple things pieces of advice for myself. So I went to a fairly large public high school, and we had a guidance counselor, and they said, you know, if you have issues with courses or with, you know, social life or whatever, you should visit your guidance counselor. Well, I didn't usually have issues with my courses, and I didn't feel the need to do that. But I figured out, you know, luckily, like, you know, maybe a year or so before college apps, that actually the guidance counselor is writing letters of recommendation to your colleges. So you want to make sure that your counselors know you well, and will be able to advocate for you. That's really important. So I guess definitely picking out the people who really know you to write your letters of rec is important. And then also one thing that's like very specific, but I don't know how many of you guys are actually starting on the Common App soon, but there are word limits for certain things on the Common App. And it can be kind of stressful to, you know, because the word limits, I think for some of them, they can be kind of short for, you know, like words, et cetera. And what you can do is you can actually abbreviate things, you know, international could be like, you know, INTL period or something like that. And you can actually, that can be helpful. So if, you know, so instead of cutting out things that you think are important, you might be able to abbreviate some stuff. And then the final thing I'd say is don't fixate, you know, when you're looking at colleges, don't fixate on one specific thing, because a mistake that I made is when I was looking at all colleges, I was like, oh, who has a really good inorganic, you know, chemistry faculty, and who would I want to work for? And that was, you know, kind of one of my primary concerns when I was applying to college. And then you know, I came to Harvard and I didn't like the person I worked for. Like it wasn't a good culture. And so I actually left that lab. And so that was like, you know, I spent a lot of time focusing on something that didn't end up being relevant, that being super relevant to my college experience. So make sure you examine things broadly in addition to looking at some of the specifics.
To add just a little bit to that, I think I would view the college app as a story. Everybody likes a good story, and you can tell one with all of your essays. And I think you should strive to do that in some way, you know, like whether there's some like unifying theme across your essays or something like that. I think that can help. So that's just my one thing to add.
All right. Thank you guys so much. Okay, now moving on to a couple of the questions that I got in the chat. One of them asked, how did you share your knowledge and your own research with other people?
Yeah, definitely a great question. And I think it's super important in general, you know, to science as a whole, to be able to communicate our ideas and the things that we learn and the things we're thinking about to others. So for my particular case, I've tried a few different things. Like one of the things that I've done before for a project is trying to open source the work that I was doing. And there's a whole community around open sourcing things in software that is quite exciting and is a cool place to be if that's what you're into. That's like a great way to get your thoughts and your ideas and your work out there to a broader audience and to sort of let people use what you're building. Another cool thing you can do is you can publish papers, and there are a lot of venues to do that. You know, some of the most prestigious publications are these like peer-reviewed, really big like research publications that are, you know, not just for undergrads, but like are prestigious for professors to publish in. And if you can get a publication in that, that's awesome. But there's also plenty of smaller conferences that are, for example, student run, or that are maybe geared more towards students, that are still excellent places to get your work out there. You could, you know, publish your work via even a blog post if you have a series of things you're building. So there are a lot of ways to get what you're working on out there, but I definitely recommend it because when you communicate what you're working on to a broader audience, it really forces you to think deeply about what are like the key contributions you're making, what are like the important aspects of your work that you want to emphasize, and honestly helps you understand your own work much better as well. So definitely a process that I'd encourage people to go through.
Okay. And Raleigh, do you have anything like about this and like what you did to share your research?
Well, I think another way to share your research is really to become involved with science research, and actually through doing some of the science fairs is an incredible opportunity to be able to share your research with others and also to learn from other people's research as well. So I guess that's another way that you can really communicate. I was also fortunate enough in high school to be able to participate in the Regeneron Science Talent Search, which I was also able to help spread my research through some of that as well.
Okay, and another question is, a lot of you mentioned how you reached out to people. Do you have like a significant, so how would you do this? And do you need to have like a significant amount of background knowledge on the topic, or do you just need to have like an interest on it?
I think that this is actually a fairly easy question to answer just because I think very few people actually have a lot of knowledge into some researchers' very niche field when they go into the lab. It doesn't usually happen ever that that's the case because research is, a very deep dive into some, the idea is you're trying to create new knowledge and expand the boundaries of what we know. And so a lot of that inherently makes it very specific and niche. And so I'd say it's really just that you're interested in it. And so no professor is going to, this is true, that no professor is going to expect you to already know a lot about their very specific area of research.
Yeah, I guess just to add on to that, when I first reached out to doing my first research opportunity, it was actually in wet lab biology. And I did it because I thought it might be cool. I wanted to try it out. I had taken a bio class and a chem class in high school and had no knowledge of the specific research field at all. But I think what is important is being able to, first of all, being really interested in the field, and second of all, being able to and willing to read about it and learn about it very quickly once you do get an opportunity. And I think that's the really cool aspect about doing research in a field like this is that you can go pretty deep into an area that you never would have had the opportunity to cover in a class. And you can learn so much from doing that.
Okay, so this is kind of jumping back to college admissions and the college process, but when should one start doing college applications? Should it be the summer? Should it be in August? Or how early?
Yeah, I can start off. I would recommend maybe just taking a look at the prompts in August or whenever they come out. I believe August. But just brainstorming, just taking, after you read the prompts, just maybe spending some time thinking, not maybe sitting down and actively thinking, but maybe if you just have some spare time in your day, if you're on the bus or if you're just eating or something, just thinking about what you would want to write for each prompt. And then I guess the more time you spend thinking about it, the more naturally you'll be able to flesh out your ideas and then eventually decide on what to write for these. Personally, I wrote a few essays, I think in August, but I wrote the bulk of them in maybe late September. I also applied early to MIT and Caltech, which were due at the end of, I want to say at the end of October. So I was actually writing some essays till the very end, but I would still recommend starting early, in September and October, because you'll want to do multiple drafts. So for my essays, I did multiple drafts of my Common App, each of my supplemental essays. So I was writing during the last few days, it was because I was redrafting them. but I think that like also you get to like know yourself a little bit. So if you're the kind of person who maybe like works best like not too early, like you could also like write it a little bit later. I think that as long as you're like give yourself ample time to like create to draft your essays, like that's honestly enough.
Okay, all right. So we're pretty much running short on time. So just like a last rapid fire, just going down the line. If there was just like one person you could thank or kind of say led or what thing helped you be where you are right now, what would it be?
Great. I'm super grateful too. So I had some teachers in high school, a couple teachers, but there's this guy Paul Strode who's super helpful. He really pushed us to pursue science and that was really helpful. And then also my research mentor in high school was a really huge advocate for me, and I think he really believed in me, and that was hugely impactful for me to be where I am today.
This is kind of cheesy, but for me, it's my mom. She's been there for me since day one. Like she supports everything I do. I think something that I personally struggle with a lot is confidence before like maybe big presentations or before big exams or like for like decisions that are out of my control, such as college apps or something. So I think just having that person being like behind me 100% unconditionally rooting for me really helped me a lot with confidence.
Yeah, for me, I would say it was my research mentor. I think he taught me a lot about what not only goes on in research, but kind of the mindset you have to have when doing anything with a lot of detail. And he really believed in my ability to do work, and he gave me a lot of responsibility. And I think that was really an eye-opening experience. And yeah, I can't thank him enough for that.
I guess someone who was really influential for me was actually my 4th grade science teacher, because that was the first science class that I guess I had taken, and that was really influential in just helping me to really enjoy science and observe the world around me.
Yeah, I'd have to say my parents first and foremost for encouraging me always to be the best version of myself and the most curious and I guess like uh, critical in a good way. And I guess like always questioning how the world works, trying to be a better citizen of the world. And then also definitely a few teachers who were very influential for me in high school, as well as mentors that I'm extremely grateful for, who encouraged me to do my research and really helped me a lot. As well as actually a few peers who are a couple of years older than me who got me really interested in doing research in the first place. It wasn't really an area that I was like particularly, I was like, oh, I'm going to do research in high school until I had a lot of conversations with some of my friends who were a couple years older who really strongly encouraged me to look into it and try to explore it as a means of, becoming a better scientist. And I'm definitely grateful to them as well.
Okay, thank you all for being a part of our panel and answering all the questions and just taking time out of your day, because I know all of you are college students and you have busy schedules. Thank you for taking your time out of your day. Fortunately, that is the end of our panel. I'm going to hand it off to Ria to introduce our next workshop and everything that's happening after.